The British pub. It's more than just a building. It's a community hub, a piece of living history, a place where generations have gathered to celebrate, commiserate, and connect. But behind the polished bar and the welcoming smile of your local landlord, there's often a story of quiet desperation. Meet the reality of running a pub in modern Britain. 4 years of taking home just £2 per hour. 4 years of choosing between paying staff and paying yourself. 4 years of holding on by your fingernails, hoping things will get better. And now, the fear that new tax policies could be the final blow that closes the doors for good. This is the story playing out in pubs across the country. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to March 2020. When COVID-19 hit, Britain's pubs were among the first to close and the last to fully reopen. Months of lockdowns, social distancing requirements that cut capacity in half, the loss of the casual after-work crowd as people worked from home, the disappearance of tourists and business travelers. Many pubs never reopened, but for those landlords who were determined to survive, the pandemic marked the beginning of an extraordinary sacrifice. Imagine working 70, 80, sometimes 90 hours a week. Imagine being responsible for staff wages, rent, utilities, stock, insurance, licensing fees, and countless other expenses. Now imagine that after all those costs are paid, you take home £2 per hour for your labor. That's roughly £160 per week for a full-time schedule, £640 per month, £7,680 per year. That's well below minimum wage, that's well below the poverty line. But for pub landlords across Britain, it's been the reality since 2020. Why would anyone accept this? Because these landlords aren't just business owners, they're custodians of community spaces. They employ local people, they sponsor the football team, host the quiz night, provide the venue for celebrations and wakes. Closing isn't just a business decision, it's admitting defeat, abandoning your community, and often losing your home if you live above the pub. So they carry on. They cut every possible cost. They work jobs that would require 3 or 4 people. They draw minimal salary and hope that next year, next month, next week will be when things finally turn around. But things haven't turned around. In fact, they've gotten worse. Energy costs have skyrocketed, wholesale beer and spirits prices have surged, food costs have risen dramatically, insurance premiums have increased, business rates remain punishing. And throughout all of this, pubs have faced the challenge of attracting customers whose own budgets have been squeezed by the cost of living crisis. When a pint costs $6 or $7 in many areas, people drink at home. When a meal at the pub costs $15, people cook at home. The very customers pubs depend on are making rational economic choices, choices that mean fewer visits, smaller tabs, reduced revenue. Landlords have tried everything. They've diversified menus, they've hosted more events, they've negotiated with suppliers, they've cut opening hours, they've reduced staff, they've frozen their own salary at that £2 per hour. Many have dipped into personal savings, remortgaged homes, maxed out credit cards. And now comes the prospect that many publicans fear could be the final straw, tax increases announced in Rachel Reeves' recent budget. Specifically, increases to employer national insurance contributions that will add thousands of pounds to annual costs for businesses that employ staff. For a pub that's already operating on razor-thin margins, or no margins at all, an additional tax burden isn't just challenging, it could be impossible. When you're taking home £2 per hour, where do you find the money to pay higher taxes? You can't cut your own wages further. You've already eliminated every possible expense. You're already working every hour available. This is what a breaking point looks like. Not dramatic, not sudden, but the slow realization that the numbers simply don't work anymore. Across Britain, we're losing pubs at an alarming rate. Industry data shows dozens closing every month. These aren't just statistics, they're community centers disappearing, jobs vanishing, pieces of local heritage being lost forever. Some communities are fighting back, local campaigns to save pubs, community ownership models, crowdfunding efforts. But these solutions can't work everywhere, and they can't address the fundamental economic pressures that make pub operation unsustainable under current conditions. The question facing policymakers is stark. Do we value pubs as community infrastructure worth protecting, or are they simply businesses that must succeed or fail on purely economic terms? Those who argue for support point to the social value pubs provide. They reduce isolation, particularly for elderly people. They provide employment and training opportunities. They anchor high streets and village centers. They preserve buildings and traditions. The cost of losing them isn't just economic, it's social and cultural. Those who design tax policy, however, face difficult choices about limited resources and competing priorities. But here's what's certain. For the landlord who's worked for £2 per hour since COVID, who's sacrificed everything to keep the doors open, who's provided a vital community space through the hardest years in living memory, the question isn't academic, it's existential. The story of Britain's struggling pub landlords is a story about the gap between economic policy and human reality. It's about the hidden cost of keeping communities together. It's about the thousands of small business owners who work for poverty wages because closing means admitting defeat. As new tax policies come into effect, many of these landlords are facing their final decision. Hold on a bit longer, hoping something changes, or accept that 4 years of £2 per hour wages were never going to be enough. For some, that decision has already been made. For others, the next few months will tell. And for all of us, the question remains, what happens to our communities when the pub can no longer afford to keep its doors open?